Oops. Sorry, Ruth, I muted you. You have to unmute yourself, Ruth. I'm sorry. Ruth?
My phone is ringing.
Thank you.
Okay, anyway, Roy has been interested in birds for a long time, and he and Nancy frequently walk in the Niskayuna landfill. And Roy saw this space of mowed grass, just as you can see behind him, that wonderful space. And he felt that there was something missing, which was grassland birds, which could be there if the grass was allowed to grow. So I'm going to let Roy fill you in on everything from there on. But thank you, Roy, for coming, and thank you, everybody else. And I'll mute myself.
And you'll have to unmute yourself, Roy, because when I went crazy and muted everybody, it included you. Sorry.
Am I in yet?
Yep, we can hear you now and we can see your screen, Roy.
Okay. First thing I want to do is show you a video.
You have to make it bigger.
This is a male bobolink doing a territorial or mating chatter. We saw these on the landfill in the spring of 2012. He's a marker species for grassland birds, mostly because you can see him. It's pretty obvious. Now let's start the slide presentation. Okay, somebody's playing music. I don't know where that's coming from. Oh, wait.
Roy, for YouTube, you accidentally clicked on the YouTube.
There we go. Sorry, I didn't show that. That was the next video in the, yes, okay. This is the link to that bobolink video. Now, as I said, in the early summer of 2012, Nancy and I were out walking and there were bobolinks on there displaying, and we found out what they were and why they were there. And then the grass was mowed to look like the grass that's behind me right now. This picture was taken a few years ago, and they disappeared. The town had been mowing every 2, 3, 4 weeks or something like that, and that drove off any bobolinks and any other of the grassland birds. The grassland birds are in trouble in the Northeast. There's loss of habitat and other issues that are going on. Also, pollinators are in real trouble. And there was a White House memorandum put out by Obama is creating a federal strategy to promote the health of honeybees and other pollinators. It was a good start, but I'm afraid it probably took a big hit when Trump came in. A little bit of research that I did right at the beginning showed that it was obvious that more habitat for grassland birds is needed, and that capped landfills, which Blatnick Park is partly made up of, can fill that need. And that if you have a habitat for grassland birds, it is also highly compatible with pollinators. You can put in the plants or wait for the flowering plants to come in to support the pollinators. And that's just something for the grassland birds to perch on. Capped landfills also often have an acreage that's suitable for grassland birds, you need about 20 acres. And the reason for that is that there's predation that comes in from surrounding woodlands. The mowing can be limited. There's EPA requirements to keep landfills free of woody growth because tree roots can penetrate the clay cap and allow percolation of water to get down into the waste and then leach out to, in this case, the Mohawk River. And there's no need to use pesticides, either herbicides or insecticides. This is a satellite view of the Blatnick Park with River Road here and GE and Capel being in this direction and Rosa Road down in this direction. The main cap is under the letter A. That's the one that has the gas vents on it for venting methane and would have a clay cap underneath the topsoil that's put on to support the plant growth. Area B is a smaller capped area. It does not have gas vents. And I believe that's true because of the types of waste that were put in there, non-toxic wastes. Area D is the mulching area and the gravel and earth storage area that the highway department uses. And right now it extends and fills this little area here. Area E is the driving range. And that is what Dr. Ashok Ramasubramanian would refer to as a green desert, because it's mowed so often that very little can survive on it. He did manage to get a small area of pollinator meadow established along one edge. If I click that button, I go to the next slide. Area F is now, and has been for several years, set aside for mowing only once a year or less. So that is pollinator habitat right now. And Area C was set aside that way as well. So that's pollinator habitat. We're doing pretty well there. This is a view of the Mohawk River from the top of the landfill, looking at the power plant down here, the Vischer Ferry power plant, and the dam leading over to Lock 7 over here. And you can see a couple of the gas vents here. Every once in a while, the air up there is a little like the air in a vegetarian restaurant. The grass here is mowed to the level that they had been maintaining up until this year. So they're in decline. Then there are other grassland birds, and this is a fairly complete list of those that are strictly grasslands, and almost all of those are in trouble with rather severe declines. I mentioned that they need 20 acres. And no mowing between the 1st of June or so and the middle of August. If you do mow during the nesting season, you can kill about 95% of the young birds. And the nesting, the male or the adults will leave. Pollinators are also in trouble, and we are because they pollinate much of the food that we eat. Most of you already know that. The stressors are loss of habitat. Part of that's due to changes in farming practices and the use of pesticides, and honeybees are subject also to parasites. Honeybees are not a native species, but they have accommodated very well, and we've accommodated with them very well here in the United States. If you mow during the growing season, you kill a lot of insects and you destroy food sources. So the capped landfill can provide a place to live and a place to eat for them. And this is for pollinator projects in general, not just the landfill. You want to hold off mowing till after the first freeze. And you would, on the landfill cap, you'd only have to do it every once in 3 years or so. If there are opportunities to plant, you should plant native grasses and wildflowers. There's an organization called the Xerces Society that will give all kinds of advice and lead you to websites where you can buy mixes for planting wildflowers that are suitable for pollinators. Organizing wildflower planting groups such as the Girl Scout, maybe ECOS, are very valuable. The town of Clifton Park has done that for at least 2 years, a few years ago. And so they've established some pollinator wildflower beds on the transfer station over in Clifton Park. And then if we could maybe persuade the town to do wildflower planting along the town highways. The state Department of Transportation, DOT, does do that in some areas already along their highways. There are some challenges to maintaining that habitat up there. One of which is the public perception that the tall grass is messy. We all have been indoctrinated into mowing our lawns and treating them with chemicals until they look like golf greens. There are current recreational uses of the landfill, disc golf, and I'll show a map of that in a couple of slides. The disc golf course on the landfill is spread all over both of those caps and does get used by some people. And I think it is partly compatible with maintaining habitat if the mowing was restricted to fairways and so on. And then the town raised a whole bunch of objections to holding off mowing until the fall in 2012, 2013. But just recently, they may have changed their mind. And I'm not exactly sure why that happened. This shows the disc golf tracks on the larger part of the landfill. And what you're seeing here is there's 2 launch points and a basket where the cup where you end up and count your score. Then a walk to the next pair of launch points and a basket and so on, all the way around and into the woods here. And then there's a bunch on the other landfill. And it would be possible to just mow some of these areas, especially this zone down here, in such a way that you could accommodate both the pollinators and the grassland birds. This, as I mentioned, is already set aside for pollinators, and it's a little small for grassland birds. There are benefits to Niskayuna. They did get some good publicity out of this in 2013, 2014. It hasn't seemed to be a strongly motivating a benefit. It can be used for student learning and projects. The ECOS intern, Matt Tate, is that his name? Had a walkout on the landfill and talked about habitat. Bird watchers and pollinator watchers, enhanced youth programs. The Capital Area Audubon Society had some programs in 2013, 2014. And I believe that the mowing costs will be reduced, even though it takes different equipment. Doing it once a year versus every few weeks, once a year at slow speed with a brush hog versus every few weeks with huge gang mowers could actually give a cost benefit to Niskayuna. Now, as I mentioned, the two small areas for reduced mowing, and the local Girl Scouts actually did plant a wildflower bed in that smaller area. Landry, the then town supervisor, did cooperate with the Audubon Society, and they did, designed and installed signs around that small area saying this was a bobolink nesting area, which was not exactly true. It should have been pollinator sign. Yeah, Audubon Society of the Capital Region, I mentioned them. They had some workshops. And then this year, something changed. I wrote them a letter in the early part of the summer. Nancy and I again saw male bobolinks demonstrating on the landfill. And for some reason, they didn't mow until just very recently. I don't know if you know Dr. Ashok Ramasubramanian. He's a professor at Union College, and he has persuaded the town to let a small wildflower meadow be put in next to the golf driving range. And he's also chairman of an ad hoc committee, which is doing a natural resource inventory for Niskayuna. He got a grant for it, and they're going to start on Blatnick Park in the spring, which to me is very good news. These are some photos of the recent photos of the landfill. This one from a walk up the hill looking over at the river, showing the areas that were left unmowed. This one is on the smaller land cap, looking back at the larger capped landfill with the vents on it. And this one is looking up the hill from the bike path with the baseball field on the left and the unmowed area on the right. What could you do? Well, again, use the Blatnick Park for walks and talks. And that article by Matthew Tate is in the Ecos News of August, September 2021. And give the town some thanks and urging to continue its limited mowing policy. Encourage them to publicize their efforts. And it might help to put the bobolink and pollinator signs around the unmowed areas so that people understood why it would look like an unmowed mess. And then encourage the town to do roadside plantings, to enlist youth, and again, approach this Audubon Society of the Capital Region for workshops. Now, in addition to the grassland bird habitat, there's a bluebird trail around the edge of Blatnick Park. And I kind of took it over about 2 years ago. We did some fixing of boxes and relocated some. And it was reasonable success this year. There were several broods of bluebirds and quite a number of broods of tree sparrows. And I don't know if you know Bob Unick, but he's a licensed bird bander, and he banded many of those birds. He is sanctioned by the federal government and the state government to permit him to do banding. And I'm wondering if anybody's interested in helping me maintain that trail. I'm not a young man anymore. These are some photographs that are taken. Nancy's the major photographer here. She's got a really great eye for pictures. Obviously a bluebird nest with 2 blue eggs and a nestling. This is Bob Unick actually applying a band to a young bluebird. This is me taking notes on a box as to what was in it. This is the bluebird mother on a nest. And this is a tree swallow waiting to go in or watching me or Nancy to see what we're going to do. Bob Unick is amazing. This is the nestling in his hand, and he has it very gently held with its head sticking out. And he gently extends a wing and measures the length of the longest wing feathers. And then somehow he manages to get a tiny little band off of this pin, open it up, put it around the leg of this little bird and squeeze it shut without dropping it in the grass or hurting the bird. And he also has on his waist a little tray with grass in it. And when we would first get to a box with nestlings, we'd take the nestlings out, put them in that grass. And then he would take them out one at a time and band them and put them back in the nest. These are some other photographs, mostly Nancy's again, taken at Blatnick Park. This is not a grassland bird, it's a catbird, but it lives in the bushes. There are quite a number of them around. A black swallowtail that we photographed up on the smaller cap. I'm not sure where this was taken, but I think it was a cold bumblebee that hadn't yet warmed up. And that's the palm of my hand behind it. Red-winged blackbirds, there's a lot of those along the river. These are actually barn swallows. And I'm not sure where they nest. They prefer buildings. So they may have been nesting in the old highway building, which went down, or in the baseball buildings, or maybe in the gas collection building, which is abandoned, that's down next to the bike path. This is in that zone that was set aside for reduced mowing and milkweed, which is good for the pollinators, especially the monarch butterflies. This is a savanna sparrow. Another picture of a bobolink. This one is actually on the landfill. The other one may have been taken from the website. And I'm pretty sure I saw meadowlarks on the smaller landfill cap earlier this year. That is not one of our photos. It came off of a website. That ends the slideshow. And is there anything you'd like to see again, or would you like to just start asking questions? I guess people need to be unmuted.
You can unmute yourselves in the bottom left corner of your screen if you kind of hover and just click on that microphone, because I can only mute you. I can't unmute you, so you have to unmute yourselves.
So Roy, it might be helpful to redisplay the map that shows the various areas, because I think it's possible some of the questions might be about, which areas need concentration. I don't know, it's just a thought.
Okay, well, this again is looking vertically satellite view. The major land cap where the acreage is big enough to support grassland birds. If you consider that, there won't be any predators in this zone here, or in this zone here, or in that zone down there. So the center area here would be very suitable for the grassland birds that need the 20 acres plus. And then B, that is probably still going to be mowed more often than we would like. There's disc golf holes across the top of this thing. But maybe the town can be persuaded to let this be more pollinator habitat. Area F is pollinator habitat. And the town has pledged not to mow that. Most of area C is pollinator habitat. And then there's some pollinator habitat that Ashok got installed along here. Does that answer questions? Right. Anything else people want to see before I?
What you're saying then is that something as simple as just not mowing that section A, just that in and of itself is enough acreage to support those grassland birds.
Yes.
Okay.
So, Roy, that is also right now the Frisbee golf, that area, A,
That, this is the
Yeah.
large landfill cap, and you can see the baseball diamond here. And these black lines
Big area.
are the paths around the disc golf course.
so in theory, it could be unmowed except for the paths for the Frisbee, which of course is gonna be, yeah.
Well,
But
the funny thing about the way they mowed this year was that they mowed a big strip around the outside of this. And they mowed
No.
a big chunk up through the middle and back. And they left a lot of the disc golf paths blocked.
That's weird.
And I checked, or I chatted briefly with a couple of people who were disc golfing, and they sort of complained a little about, I can't go there because I'll lose my Frisbee. And we explained that it was that way to allow the birds to nest. And they said, well, okay. Nobody yelled at me. I didn't, and I haven't heard any feedback from the disc golf club. There's an area club that talked the town into installing this. And I don't know whether they're still pushing, maintaining it or not. Many of the launch pads, which are just sand surrounded by timber, where you stand to throw the Frisbee, are deteriorating and weed filled. And so I have no idea how
Maybe,
good.
yeah, right.
Is there no place else in town that might be more suitable for Frisbee golf?
Well, there's
Central
one
Park.
actually, yeah, there's actually one in Central Park in Schenectady. So this club has kind of established disc golf courses all over, and they hold tournaments and, you know, travel from place to place and have a website. I just haven't paid much attention to them in the last few years. But they were a
Right.
force in,
Yeah, it seems that there must be other places.
oh,
Well,
there are.
actually, it's not a bad use of the land if it's grassland habitat. And grassland is also a habitat that benefits from burns rather than mowing. And you could use the lines and the course for the Frisbee as burn breaks. That could be lower grass that gets mowed in very much like a golf course. And the rest could go into more native plants. And a burn would control it, and you could do a burn every
Okay,
couple of
do a
years.
burn.
It would really be fine.
Yeah, well, I'll keep that in mind. I imagine that the resistance to that would be fairly stiff, but
To a burn, yeah, especially
Well,
when
there
there's
really isn't-
methane.
Right.
Well, but there isn't, but it's capped, and you can, I believe you can.
There's
put that
vents.
up. How much, Roy, do you know how much is the soil top over the
Interesting to
cap?
find out.
I know, I think it's only a few inches or so.
Well,
Enough.
that would inhibit native plants because their roots are so much longer.
You know, I don't know. I've noticed that there is a fair amount of different wildflowers working their way in,
Mhm.
especially down in this zone where they stopped mowing it. So it hasn't been necessary to go in and plant, although that would speed the development of habitat for pollinators.
Well, we could, I'm sure we could get some seed sharing with the pine bush and stuff because the habitats are similar. But it's the root depth that can inhibit over a cap if it's only a couple inches.
No, it'd be more than that. It'd have to be 8 or 10 inches or more, but
Okay,
I don't know. I'd have to ask. There's a landfill closing plan, which I haven't been privy to, that specifies all of those things, you know, how thick the clay cap would have to be
Yeah.
and how thick the soil would have to be and what would be planted on it and so on. So,
do you know if there, Roy, do you know if there's any barrier between the river and the landfill? Because that's awfully close. I was involved with the landfill in Buffalo on Lake Erie. And that, you know, that was one of the things that we had a problem with, was the closeness to the lake.
well, I think it might be a current problem. I've noticed some strange colors coming out into the river adjacent to the landfill. There are some monitoring wells, but I have no idea how often they're monitored and what they find in them.
Well, when we were monitoring the one on Lake Erie, they didn't like our findings, so our contract was eliminated.
Right. By the way, this picture here is a monarch caterpillar. For those of you who have never seen or associated the caterpillar with the monarch. And that's a milkweed plant. Oh,
You mentioned some potential kind of partners, such, especially young people. I remember the Girl Scouts and I think some other group. I live up north of you in Glens Falls, and just over in Fort Edward, there's the Grassland Bird Trust, which has grown rather dramatically in the 6 years I've lived here. And they just seem like they might be a potential partner of some sort, you know, if only to provide some expertise and lobbying, if you will. And does that seem like a reasonable thing to approach?
I'm aware of that. And early on, I tried to contact somebody in that Grassland Trust, but I didn't follow through on it. But that's a good point. What is it?
You know, they're not always, it's interesting because they're not always in the office. They only within the last couple of years did they actually have a paid director. You know, it was all volunteer for quite a while, but you know, I wouldn't mind, you know, just offering to see it. I've managed to contact them a few times and tell them what you're doing and ask if they can be of any assistance if you'd like me to.
Sure. That'd be great.
Okay.
Roy, you mentioned
Yeah.
that
Couple of
an indicator
questions.
species. And an indicator species is a wonderful way of focusing the attention of the public on that. If we could, I've always wanted to do an indicator species within the region as far as plants and animals and you know, days in the week, you in the night you can see the stars, etc., various indicators, but sustainability indicators. But if we had, if since the bobolinks are there on the site and they go away, can we, you know, a publicity campaign that could be run by ECOS to have people be aware of the bobolink and maybe even rename that hill Bobolink Hill or something. To, you know, you combine marketing and environment, you know.
Uh-huh.
But if it were like Bobolink Hill and then started, so people's attention could be focused with that, that
Mhm.
might help.
Yeah,
I had a couple of questions. It does seem like we need to really know and understand what the EPA, what the requirements for the capped landfill, where the pipes are and so forth. And as far as the woody growth, like, is there anything specific about how deep the tap roots can go, or how large the woody growth can be? Because I mean, I know those, you know, even sumac grows so fast and becomes woody so fast that one of the guys that mows for the town was telling me he just burns out belts on the mower. And I want to, like, I mean, I love the idea with all the pollinators and, you know, letting it grow longer, but we have to be realistic about what a mower can do. And you mentioned two kinds of mowers, a bush hog
brush hog.
and a brush hog. Yeah, I think it might be the same as a bush hog, but anyway. And what was the other kind of mower?
It was the one that they used to mow all the time with was a 3-gang rotary mower, and it was about 18 feet wide or longer when you stacked the 3 in a row, pulled by a tractor at fairly high speed, and it would cut grass to about 6 inches height. But you couldn't use that if the grass got more than a foot tall because it would bog down.
So aside from grass getting more than a foot tall, like I'm wondering what the capabilities of the mower are with things like sumac or something that becomes woody pretty quickly.
Well, if it's only 3 inches of dirt, the woody things are not going to last very long.
Oh, they
Well, I don't know.
penetrate that's the reason for not letting them grow, though, is because they actually do. And I think the tap roots can penetrate the liner. So I'm wondering if we could find out more from the town engineer, or, you know, some real specifics about what the requirements are.
That would be the closing plan.
Okay. And so is that public, the closing plan?
I'm sure it's publicly
Okay.
available. I don't even think you'd need an FOI to get it. There's nothing secretive about it. It just says what you have to do to go from municipal waste, active municipal waste landfill to a cap, which is what it is right now. So
It sounds like there's interest in doing more to support this idea, Roy. And it sounds like Melinda and Dana are interested enough to do a few things and to continue a conversation. And I think that ECOS would be interested in being involved in the conversation so that I'm not sure how much ECOS will be able to do other than be involved, but we would be interested in being involved and see where it goes. I think the conversation with the engineer and looking at the closing plan and so on and so forth, all is part of it, but public interest in the idea of supporting grassland birds is the first step to getting anything done. And I like Melinda's thoughts on that. And the bobolink would be an amazing thing to start to promote as a indicator species, and the fact that it's on the landfill. I mean, who knew? I didn't. No, we know about bluebirds, we know about monarch butterflies, but how many people really know that bobolinks are around? I didn't until I talked to Roy.
They were in the Jeep.
So
they got.
I think that that's
Yeah, well,
exciting and worth making a fuss about.
Well, I think that positive feedback to the town on the actions taken so far is, would be very helpful in
Yeah.
ensuring that they didn't go back to their old practices next year.
Right. And
Who should
we
those
have,
be addressed to, Roy?
Well, right now they're changing the administration. Yasmin Syed is leaving. The new woman is coming in. Unfortunately, the woman who, town council member and committee member, Perez Jackwith, Rosemarie, I think was instrumental in getting the word to the highway department to stop mowing everything. Now, whether it was an experiment on their part or whether it was a change in policy, I don't know. I've never had any direct feedback from any of the people whom I've written on this, including the head of the highway department. I copied him on any email that I sent.
so he's definitely aware of you.
He might be ticked off at me, I'm not sure. But anyway, I would say address to the town supervisor. And maybe after January 1, when the new regime comes in.
You know, I was looking at this, the Grassland Bird Trust. They have a page on management of best practices for grassland birds and kind of management of grasslands. And it's divided into sections, but one has to do with mowing. And one paragraph in there says, oh shoot, I lost it, but oh, here it is. Large fields should be divided in thirds, and 1/3 should be mowed each year to provide a diverse mix of grass heights and densities beneficial to most grassland birds species. And I'd heard them say that before, so you kind of rotate around. But farther down, they talk about control of invasive and unwanted species, and that's where they take up staghorn sumac, which is not, it's a native, but because it can spread so easily, as was it Janet who, no, it wasn't Janet, it was
Sarah.
that out. They talk about just going in and cutting it down to the ground mechanically. And so I know that the Grassland Bird Trust people, you know, get teams of volunteers to go out into those areas and do those kinds of things to keep those from spreading. But I thought that's interesting about that, you know, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3.
I think
Actually,
that's mostly if you have a very a larger area than 20 acres, I think. Is that right, Roy?
yes.
20 acres.
Five
is
Rivers
good.
has, conservation area south of Albany has that. They have an area that they rotate. I forget how many acres each third is, and they mow every third year. I started off just trying to get them to stop mowing every 6 weeks.
Mhm.
And so it looks like they've done at least that this year for part of the landfill. So I count that as a success. If we could get rid of the disc golf course, then you could maybe mow A and B every other year or something. But right now, it seems to be good enough. The bobolinks come back if there's a year's worth of growth. And
Right.
rather than try to get the whole pie, I'll take a piece at a time.
Yeah. I think that the recommendation is for smaller areas like farmers' fields, for instance, is to just cut later so that the birds have a chance to fledge before it's cut down.
Yeah.
In other
yeah.
words, a year at the end of, in the fall.
Right, well, August 15th is apparently late enough to avoid hurting grassland
Mm.
birds. But that time period between then and October, when the freezes hit, is prime time for pollinators. So you really want, if you're gonna accommodate both types of
Mm.
wildlife, you want to stop mowing earlier in the spring before the flowers start out and wait till way late in the fall.
Yeah, these folks are recommending stopping by April 23rd. I don't, that seems like an odd date, but
Mhm.
Yeah,
No,
well,
it's-
maybe some of the
it's-
grassland
It's
species.
usual,
So,
and that's about when you stop burns too. Your burns usually are in February, March, depending on the conditions. And then often later than October. November is usually a good burn. If you can get, it's very dependent on weather conditions, of course. I
Right.
think it would be nice if we could, if the ECOS board, Ruth, could get behind the idea of renaming it Bobolink Hill, and we could go out with petitions.
I
to
think
the
before
community.
we get to that, we have to have more of a, I think it's something we need to talk about. I like the idea. It may be something that ECOS can support, but I think before we get that far out on a limb,
Okay,
we need to have more discussion and perhaps more of a plan, don't know, steps and suggestions and information and all that stuff. But it sounds like there's enough interest and concern that we should be able to have a few discussions and get to the point of maybe being able to do that. So I guess the question for me is anybody willing to sort of take the lead other than me, which I don't, I'm limited in terms of time at the moment. I'm still president of the organization. We'd be willing to facilitate, but I can't personally lead. Is anybody willing to do that? Like Roy or Melinda?
well, Roy has the on-ground experience with the site, and with the wonderful work Bob is doing and Roy is doing on the site and the continuation. I'd be willing to help. I'm better at outreach than I am on the other stuff, in all honesty, Ruth.
I mean, one of the things that I can do is, we have the ECOS Zoom site, and meetings can be held with this program that we're on now, which are more than the 40 minutes, which if you don't have a.
you're muted.
You're muted, Nick.
Ruth, you muted yourself.
Okay, so we can offer a meeting space on this site, whatever it's called, ECOS site, which means you can have longer meetings, and I can call the meetings and so on and so forth. But leading the meetings and then organizing the times, et cetera, maybe not. So if other people are interested in following through, I'm willing to facilitate, I guess, is what I'm saying.
I have a question, Ruth.
Mhm.
Does ECOS right now have a program proposal process where if you want to do a project, you gather
No,
some information?
no,
Okay.
not an
Yeah,
official
yeah,
one.
Ruth, we do. Remember that, like, there's a form that people kind of
Mhm.
fill out and runs by Cindy. So we do have, you're supposed to go through that, fill out this little form about what it's about and the purpose of it, what it would involve. And then it goes to Cindy, who presents it to the rest of the board.
This could be.
Landfills are very interesting, and there's a lot to look at. So maybe some background information could be a good thing.
Yeah. Somebody has to be, yeah. Anyway. Not sure where that leaves us.
Roy, would you mind unsharing your screen? Because maybe we can get a look at people's faces and
Okay,
get a better idea of who we want to encourage to maybe take the lead on this. So Melinda, you said you would be willing to work with Roy, is that correct?
Well, I'm better on outreach than I am on researching and going into the political weeds.
Well, outreach is important, Melinda. So,
Well, that's where it's better to focus me there,
yeah.
in all honesty.
Okay.
So anybody want to take on the political dimension of this? I guess Roy is already somewhat doing that, but
yeah, I do things in fits and starts, so,
That was Ash.
and I think, well, I don't know. I can obviously be part of a group that struggles with this.
yeah, right.
I don't know whether it requires a full-scale project from ECOS, but if
That's what
ECOS,
I'm thinking. It can be just, I agree.
if it could be that ECOS members, either individually or as a collective, express to the town their support for maintaining grassland bird and pollinator habitat at Latnick Park. That would go a long way, because for a while, I think I was one of 2 or 3 voices pinging on the town about this. And maybe it was
It might have had something to do with it. Sometimes your work, things like that have an effect.
right, but it would have been a bigger effect had I enlisted a lot more people at the beginning to make their voices heard with the town, because squeaky wheel and all that.
Well, Melinda suggested, like the idea of getting that area renamed as Bobolink Hill.
Mhm.
There was also a suggestion of putting up, signs.
Signs.
There's
Right.
of bobolinks scattered around, and, just letting people know that, oh, you're in bobolink habitat. I mean, it can be exciting to people who are walking through there to know the bobolinks are there, and then they keep an eye out for them, and then you start feeling some ownership and some protective nature. But, so I think,
Yeah.
I don't know if that is, even if the project is as simple as renaming the hill and getting permission to put up the signs and raising the resources necessary to produce the signs, there's a project now. Is that a project? I'm brand new to ECOS and don't live in Niskayuna, so I don't think the town of Niskayuna is going to be very interested in what I have to say, because usually the first question is, are you a voter here? Well, thank you very much, go away.
That aspect is dealing
I'm
with
real happy. What?
that aspect is dealing with politicians, and those of us who are Niskayunians
Yeah.
don't
Well,
matter.
Oh, yeah.
it's a chicken egg kind of thing. And I agree with Dana. I don't think we have to, Ruth and I are usually on the same page, but I think that sometimes it's good to have it driven by awareness and interest, and then you'll get the impetus behind a project. But I agree, something just as simple as getting a name change, and we could just do we could just do petitions at the co-op for crying out loud, to get people, to meet people and say, would you like, there is this bobolink habitat. We'd like to name it Bobolink Hill. Are you interested? If they just sign off and that they live in Niskayuna, that will start to generate interest, and hopefully younger people, because as much as I love all of you, I'm looking around and you're all of a certain age, at least the ones I can see. And but if we start to involve more people, that's good for East Coast and good for
Absolutely.
for the habitat.
Right, and I agree that awareness is number one, and we talk about getting younger people involved. We talked about having Girl Scouts plant flowers. Well, what about having Girl Scouts take over this project of making signs, little fact signs about the bobolink, and placing them around, and people can stop and learn, because like Ruth said, who knew that they were there? I'm sure very few people. But if we can get one of those young Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, one of those younger groups to take this and get a badge for it, I mean, it's a win-win.
I think the signs, maybe before we try to, just so people are, that's the beginning of building up awareness, is if we put up, if there are signs saying that this is happening.
Signs have to go through the town.
Yes.
I will start to go
Okay,
to it's the Parks and Recreation and Highway Department meeting where I got my first in, and where I made the first presentations. And they're the people that decide whether or not to put up signs. There are a couple of signs talking about bobolinks with a link back to the Audubon Society of the Capital Region that I think the town paid for. The ASCR designed them with some input from me, and then the town paid for them, and we even had a little ceremony with Landry to put one of the stakes in the ground. I bit my tongue about the fact that it really wasn't the right place to put it, but we did it, and he got some stroking, and
Article in the paper.
and
Yeah.
there's actually a little blurb in the Gazette about that time frame. And so there
Yeah.
was progress early on. Then I got kind of discouraged in the intervening few years, and then kind of picked it up again last year and this year. So
I'd be willing to go to a meeting with you, Roy, if that'll help. But also, we worked several years ago. We did signage that was written. It was designed and color signs that worked with the Rotary and with a couple other things. There's some around the library right now in Niskayuna. There's some along the bike trails, as I recall, near is it Sunrise Park, Sunset Park? I can never remember. But it was Ecos driven, and they were, attractive signs that were informative and were permanent and lasting. So, it isn't as though we haven't done this stuff before.
right. Did you have to get permission from the town to actually put them up?
Well, as I said, one was at the library, so I think it was during the tenure of Patrick Clear. So I can reach out to Patrick and find out, unless somebody else wants to do that.
probably had a grant to do it. It may have been
Yeah.
from the community, Niskayuna community, whatever it's called.
Yeah, I think one of them may have been through Stewart's too.
Mhm.
Stewart's has been a good grantor. for
Yeah,
things like
yeah,
that.
mostly for kids projects, but I
Mhm.
know he's got community grants from Niskayuna Community Fund. I guess it's called Community Fund for things like signs.
Is it NCAP? Niskuna Community Action Program, something like that?
Yeah.
No, somebody help me out. There's some sort of a community foundation. I think that's what it's called, community foundation. I don't know. Maybe, I know they give money for projects and I know ECO's got some.
Connectivity Foundation is giving a lot of money to little projects these days. And it comes up in various groups that I'm involved with, but I don't know the criteria whether ECOS would be.
This is what, Steve?
Schenectady Foundation.
Yeah,
That's the entire name. It's not fancy.
yeah.
What
I
I've
think they get
seen,
some of the money that's coming in from COVID.
from the letters I get from them, their focus has been more on social action and feeding
Yeah.
people and children
Yeah.
in the past few years, less on environment.
Mhm.
Right. So it sounds as if we at least have Roy and Melinda who will do follow-up. And anybody else who's interested in staying in touch, Dana is interested in staying in touch. You're muted, Dana.
I'm going to at least approach the folks at the Grassland Bird Trust and just ask if they have any information or guidance for how to go forward, and I'll report back to Roy with that.
Sounds good.
In that list of websites that Cindy has put on the website associated with this talk, I think there's some government offices. What used to be soil conservation is now Natural Resources Conservation Service, something like that, NRCS. They've got a local office and they have, for instance, a planter that they can rent, probably not for not much money, for planting wildflowers. So there are a lot of resources out there. It's a question of how to bring them to bear. And right now, I think public visibility is probably the biggest one so that they don't revert back to frequent mowing next year.
Right.
If they do, then it's another blow to grassland birds.
Yeah. I wonder what the next step would be in terms of, besides, everybody writing a letter to the town to say thank you and we noticed and we, that sort of thing.
That'd be step one. And I will start trying to make the committee meetings that are held, the Parks Department, Parks and Recreation and Highway Department, and see if I can sense where they want to go with it. There's privilege of the floor in those meetings, so. We'll go from there.
This is a
Okay.
wonderful project, and I think it's really good. I'd like to see it go forward. I'd like to see Roy's wonderful talk given to more people. I wish we weren't doing this in November and December.
Yeah, I know the timing is challenging. Maybe we could make a pact or a plan or whatever you want to call it to all of us or many of us or however many people are interested to meet again in January, February. And if we have the names of people who are here who might be interested in finding out what's happening, we
Why
can
not?
reconvene and more towards spring when
Well, there's two things. One, towards spring, where thoughts are turning to
Yep.
maintenance and also the new regime in place with the new town
Yeah.
supervisor and town
Yeah.
council.
So that might be a good time to think again or think some more.
In the
I
meantime,
think it would be good in winter to kind of, we have more time to lay out a plan. And so that once spring comes,
Mhm. January,
yeah, a month goes by pretty fast.
beginning of January.
Right. It's getting into the holiday season, which makes it. get
Tell
people
me
to-
about it. Yeah, okay, beginning of January sounds good. We can somehow or other pull together anybody who is interested, and I'm not quite sure how we do that, other than sending out a email, whatever Cindy does, and
Mhm.
telling everybody that we're going to do something.
Yep.
Basically, we'll just meet again. Just doesn't have to be a formal talk like this. It'll be more a meeting of getting
Yeah.
together and thinking about what the next steps might be.
Right. Okay.
Okay, I see
Great
some,
talk, Roy. Nice.
Yeah,
Thank you
thank
all.
you.
I hope you had fun doing it and you got us all excited about the bobolinks, and I think we have a good starting
and
point.
pollinators, Cindy.
Oh, where, no, I
Don't forget the pollinator.
top on the
That's Cindy's
pollinator.
thing.
Well, the link to the Xerces Society is in that bulletin that I sent. What I didn't include, I should have, the Cornell Ornithology Lab website, which is a great place to go for information about birds. And the website is allaboutbirds.org. One word, all about birds.
I'll add that to the .org. I'll add that. So as I was telling Roy when we got started, the reminder MailChimp had an attachment that Roy had sent with lots of great information and links. It's on the website, but once the event is over, it won't be on the website. However, I will attach it to the recording of tonight's meeting, and I will add this allaboutbirds.org to it as well.
One thought about the, if we're going to do some sort of a meeting, it can't be on the first, second, or third Thursday. Because those are ECO's official meetings, so it would have to be an unofficial meeting. And it could be the fourth Thursday in December, whenever that is, or it could be the fourth Thursday in January.
Does it
I
have
mean,
to be
it doesn't have to be a
Thursday?
Thursday, it's just that I'm programmed for Thursdays.
Do it on a different.
Right, well, in the meantime, my email address is on that presentation and on the added information, and feel free to communicate.
Sounds good.
Good, thank you.
If we don't come up with something else, let's think about the fourth Thursday in January, which is free.
Okay.
So fourth Thursday in January. Hopefully I'll see everybody again and
At
have,
7?
you know, and we'll
Hopefully
start
we'll all
something
see you.
exciting.
Right, and don't forget to come to our party in December.
Yes, right.
Fine.
Party
Okay,
in December.
Thank you for all your hard
Think
work, Roy.
bobolinks.
Thanks, Roy, thank you.
Thanks, Roy. It was
We all set then?
exciting. I think so.
so,
All right, thank you. Good night.
Thank
Happy
you very
Thanksgiving.
much, Roy.
And thanks, everybody.
Thanksgiving?
Enjoy your
You can
holiday.
holiday.
do
See you in December. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.